Have you ever stood on the edge of a mountain, looked across a valley stretching toward the horizon, lifted your camera, and felt certain that you were about to capture something unforgettable? Then you look at the photograph and something is missing. The mountains are still there. The light is still there. Every tree, every cloud, and every distant ridge is exactly where you remember it. Yet the image feels strangely lifeless. It feels flat. It feels as though the camera somehow forgot to capture the experience itself. This isn't because your camera failed. Every camera ever built shares the same limitation. The remarkable part is that the photographers we admire most learned how to overcome that limitation. And once you understand how they did it, you will never look through a viewfinder in quite the same way again. Long before the first camera existed, artists wrestled with exactly the same problem. They could see a world filled with distance, atmosphere, and dimension, yet every canvas they painted was completely flat. Their greatest challenge was convincing another human being that a sheet of fabric held an entire world. The Renaissance masters became obsessed with the question. They experimented with perspective, shadows, overlapping shapes, and the way roads seemed to narrow as they disappeared into the distance. They realized that depth was never something that existed on the canvas itself. It existed inside the mind of the viewer. Photography inherited that discovery the moment the shutter was invented. Here is something that surprises almost everyone. Your eyes never actually see a complete scene. They jump thousands of times every hour, collecting tiny fragments of information while your brain quietly stitches everything together into a seamless world. In other words, your brain creates depth. It doesn't simply observe it. That changes everything. When you stand in a forest, your eyes constantly move between the leaves close to you, the tree trunks in front of you, and the light filtering through the canopy in the distance. You feel surrounded because your brain is building layers. Your camera, however, records a single frozen viewpoint. It has no understanding of importance. It has no memory. It has no curiosity. It simply records whatever happens to fall within the frame. Great photographers know this, so instead of expecting the camera to create depth, they build it before pressing the shutter. Think about walking through an old European street. Notice how a doorway frames another street beyond it. A bicycle rests against a wall while a distant church tower quietly anchors the background. None of those elements are accidental. The world naturally offers layers if we slow down enough to notice them. The difference between an ordinary photograph and an unforgettable one is often the decision to include those layers instead of excluding them. Leonardo da Vinci wrote extensively about perspective centuries before photography existed. Modern photographers still rely on many of the same visual principles, proving that cameras changed technology but never changed the way human beings perceive the world. Depth is rarely created by expensive equipment. In fact, some of the most powerful images ever made came from simple cameras in ordinary hands. The secret lies in asking a different question. Beginners ask, "What should I photograph?" Professionals quietly ask, "What can I place between my viewer and the subject that invites them into the story?" That single question transforms composition into storytelling. Imagine standing beside a lonely fisherman at sunrise. If all you photograph is the fisherman, your viewer sees a person. If you include the weathered rope lying in front of him, the gentle mist drifting across the water, and the mountains fading into the background, your viewer experiences the morning. One image records a subject. The other records a place, a mood, and a memory. Light strengthens this illusion. Midday light spreads evenly across everything, making every object compete for attention. Early morning and late afternoon light separate one layer from another. Shadows quietly carve distance into the scene, while highlights guide the eye forward. Side light reveals texture. Backlight creates silhouettes that instantly separate subjects from their surroundings. Depth is often painted by light long before it is shaped by composition. Your lens does not create depth. Light creates depth. Change the light, and the same location suddenly feels completely different without changing your equipment at all. There is another reason photographs appear flat, and it has very little to do with cameras. We have become accustomed to photographing from standing height because that is where we spend most of our lives. Yet the world becomes dramatically different the moment we kneel, climb a staircase, or take 3 careful steps to either side. Every movement changes the relationship between foreground, middle ground, and background. Great photographers are rarely standing still. They are constantly searching for the angle where the layers begin talking to one another. Watch documentary filmmakers, and you'll notice something fascinating. They often begin with a detail before revealing the entire scene. A close leaf, a hand, a doorway. Then the wider environment unfolds naturally. Our minds enjoy discovery. Photography works exactly the same way. Give your viewers something to explore before revealing everything at once. Every step you take changes the geometry of your photograph. Composition is not about moving objects. It is about moving yourself until the story becomes clear. Perhaps this explains why certain photographs stay with us for decades. Think of the great landscape photographers whose images almost allow you to feel the cold air. Think of the street photographers whose pictures seem alive with movement despite being perfectly still. They understood that viewers do not simply look at photographs. They travel through them. Their eyes enter somewhere, pause, wander, discover, and eventually arrive at the subject. That invisible journey is depth. Tomorrow, instead of searching for a beautiful location, search for beautiful layers. Find a nearby branch that can soften the foreground. Look for leading lines that quietly connect each part of the frame. Allow distant mountains, buildings, or clouds to finish the story rather than dominate it. You may discover that extraordinary photographs were never hiding in extraordinary places. They were hiding in ordinary places that simply needed to be seen differently. The next time you lift your camera, remember that it cannot experience wonder. It cannot feel distance. It cannot understand atmosphere. Those gifts belong entirely to you. Your responsibility as a photographer is not to record the world exactly as it appears. Your responsibility is to recreate the feeling of standing there for someone who never will. Photographs are not windows into reality. They are invitations. The strongest images gently take the viewer by the hand and guide them from one layer to the next until they reach the heart of the story. That journey is what separates documentation from art. It is what transforms a flat rectangle into an experience that lingers long after the photograph has disappeared from the screen.